Wizards of the Coast is coming out with a new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. They're calling it D&D Next, and it's a playtest packet. It's a beta. You could play it, and I played a little bit of it. Mostly looked at it from a Dungeon Master's point of view, and I think it's cool. So I'm gonna do a review on it, and maybe kind of keep a little upkeep and do a second review. But this one's gonna be a bit long. Wizards is right now, they're calling it D&D Next. I'm thinking they should just do a 5th edition, because D&D Next, it just sounds a little bit too Sony or Nintendo. It's just unnecessary, because they've only had 4 editions in close to 40 years. I mean, they got less publications than New Edition has discography, minus Belle Biv DeVoe. When you only got 4 in 40 years, you don't need an original title.
So Shaq, it ain't even out yet, and you already playing it?
Yeah, BJ. It's not out, but you can play test it. It's like a beta, like with a massive multiplayer game. Let me back up for a second. This review is not just going to be about 5th edition. It's going to be about Dungeons & Dragons in general, because I've been away from the series for a while, and I'm making a return. So I'm going to talk about why I've been away and why my perspective is a little bit different since I've been away, and I'm coming at it from the perspective of somebody that's looking at it kind of with new eyes. So I'll get into that. I'm also going to talk a little about how I was working on a pen and paper adventure, and I was looking for a rule set, and I looked at Pathfinder for a while, and I'm liking D&D Next because Wizards is actually listening to people, and they're getting feedback. So I'm offering feedback along with what I'm planning on homebrewing regardless, and maybe they'll take some of the things I want to do with, from this video or whatever I might have posted on the forums, because they're listening to people. It reminds me of back in 2009 or 10 when I did the video comparing NBA 2K9 to College Hoops 2K8. Visual Concepts, they listen to people. It wasn't just me. My video got like 30,000 views, but there were other people who had like 100K views. And Visual Concepts, you could tell they were listening because they were taking the things we cared about. When we broke it down, and they admitted to it, like on Operation Sports. So they were listening, and you can tell the difference between NBA 2K9 and NBA 2K11. Hopefully Wizards can do the same thing with Dungeons & Dragons. We'll see. Before I get to my review on 5th edition, I just want to explain why I turned my back on Wizards of the Coastline. The common criticism for 4th edition was that it was too much World of Warcraft-like. I've heard that argument opposing. I've heard the pro-argument. I don't want to go there. I don't want to join a 4th edition WoW rant and talk about stuff that other people say. I can only speak for myself, and just certain things that jump out was the equality of roles and classes and healing surges and item levels. And I wouldn't mind if D&D became more militaristic if it wasn't so cheesy. I read and understand 4th edition. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. I have the 4th edition handbook right above me in my office. It was a lot of little things too. Like they got rid of gnomes, and gnomes were always my favorite race. It's just a matter of depth, personality. Like 2nd edition parties had power variables. I would say too much so with dual classing and demi-human limits. Dual classing, I couldn't stand it. It was unbalanced. Beyond that, you were left with a system that balanced parties based on viability instead of overall power. Then you had 3rd edition with the versatility and the variety and the sort of loose play, silly putty, malleable roles. And 3rd edition characters, it was like you mixed Navy SEALs and Rangers and just people from different backgrounds and origins. They were like the X-Men or action movie star. So you go from variant power levels and loose roles to equal power and hard roles. And I'm not criticizing it. It just wasn't my thing. Some of the high-level powers for fighters and warlords, it was just there to keep pace with spellcasters. So it just felt video gamey. And then you had item levels. I could go on and on about item levels. You always had like another item that was X amount of money more than the one you had, just like an MMO. And one other thing about 4th edition that comes to mind is they dropped the lawful evil alignment, which is an insult to at least for my inner anarchist and libertarian, because the most evil people I've ever dealt with were in courtrooms. So you're slapping the Republican Tea Party and the Democratic Occupier in the face at the same time. And speaking of them, when are they going to have like a tackle football game or something? Because the Olympics just passed, and you didn't even have a spoof on Saturday Night Live where they were going at it.
Yes, Shaq. I done met some Occupier girls, yo. They were just a little bit musty. Maybe they should try to find out whoever owns Right Guard and occupy that.
No, don't go there. Yeah, I didn't hate 4th edition. It just, at least not in total. I mean, there were things I took from it. I have the handbook, and I took maybe about 15% of the exploits, maybe a little bit more than that. Because if it was just 4th edition, that wouldn't have been a big deal, because you could have combined 3rd edition and 4th edition, and you'd have a hell of a homebrew. My issue was, the main thing was the destruction of the Forgotten Realms. Because when Ed Greenwood created the Forgotten Realms, I think it was like late 80s, it was an all-purpose playground. It was an open sandbox, free to do whatever you want, because you had like a standard Camelotish nation, you had nations ruled by coin and commerce, you had 2 nations ruled by magic, you had Babylon, Greece, Rome, ancient Egypt, fantasy Mesopotamia, a jungle inhabited by dinosaurs, and Aztec setting with Helm, conquistadors, a sub-Saharan African setting, Oriental setting, Middle Eastern setting, Horseland setting, Arctic, 2 glaciers, a glacier right next to a desert, another desert, Rashomon wishes with spirit animals. You had the Underdark with drow and deep gnomes. One of the playtest adventures is in a deep gnome city. So you had all this, and by nature, yeah, it was generic. The personality came from the NPCs and the hundreds of novels and X amount of video games and the 2 best comic books ever made. The personality was just the character. That's all it had. You had a handful that hogged the spotlight that were well known, but beyond that, there were really some unique characters that didn't get a lot of pub. And the pantheon of gods that was reduced by like at least 70% or so, those were part of the characters. I remember an interview with Chris Perkins, and I didn't really know who he was, and it was kind of he was explaining why they did what they did to the Forgotten Realms. According to Mr. Perkins, the sentiment was that the NPCs were the stars of the game, and the players expected them to come in and save the day. And this is an example of fixing something for the wrong reasons that wasn't broke in the first place. If I'm a DM and I suspect that the players think that NPCs are going to come and steal their shine and save them from something, then I'm just going to, the only thing I can do, and I'm not really a violent person, but I'm like, hey, if I was going to jump on you and give you a proper beating, would Oprah come and save you? Would John Jones and Vladimir Klitschko and Paul Giamatti save you? And you don't have CNN, so how do you even know about these people anyway? Every world's going to have prominent NPCs. That's just how it is. So now you fast forward the world 115 years, and you're still going to need rulers and politicians. The problem with the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting wasn't that it was too celebrity driven, it just wasn't common man driven enough. The VIP NPCs had their place, but unfortunately the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, and I loved it, but it didn't illustrate the common man. It didn't really tell you what it was like to live in each region. And I remember a discussion I had back on the Interplay forums where I was basically trying to tell them that, most of the people in the Forgotten Realms, they live out in the sticks. And I pretty much held it because I took out, I pointed to the book, and it like in each region, for an example, you got 1.5 million people or something like that, and maybe 300,000 live in the big cities. And that's kind of consistent with the historical setting and all that. But you wouldn't understand that because you got some pretty bad monsters. Because remember the 2nd edition manual? You had monsters like Catoblepas. It looked like a cow, but it had a long, ugly head and a face. And the creature's power was it had a death gaze. It'd just look at you and you'd be dead. It reminded me of Ed Wansler Jr. from Boondocks. When Riley asked him if his guns were real, and he said, well, if I pointed at you and I pulled the trigger, would you be dead? And that's how a Catoblepa is. It's like a Medusa, but a little bit worse. Because I lived in Los Angeles, like when it was the gang capital of the world, and in that neighborhood that Denzel Washington was in Training Day. Give me all of that over something that'll look at you and make you dead. So the Forgotten Realms campaign setting didn't really explain how people live there. It didn't give you like a population breakdown of the monsters and their day-to-day activities and how they deal with, with all the drama and living with stuff that can kill them.
I don't know, Big Shaq. I could see Hoover Gang's Crip riding on those Catoblepas.
Probably, BJ. They probably would. But, still, the point remains, because there was other reasons, too. Chris Perkins was talking, they didn't use the Forgotten Realms for their own games because they couldn't master the history and the lore. Stuff like that just didn't really make that much sense to me because it's it's so malleable anyway. You can do whatever you want with it. And fast forward in the game, 115 years, I think it was, they didn't even kill off, they couldn't bring themselves to kill off the major characters anyway. I mean, you still have Drizzt and Elminster and Artemis. And Artemis was human. He's supposed to die of old age. They found a way to keep him. So, really, it was the fringe NPCs, most of them that died. You know, the people that the core fans would appreciate. And then the Spell Plague, it didn't make an ass bit of sense. I mean, Mystra died like 15 years ago in the time of troubles, and the land was scarred, and you know, they just came with the new Mystra. They replaced her. So now, Mystra dies, and all hell breaks loose for years and years and years. And why kill Mystra? I mean, she just died. So you got like a new Mystra that's more mortal, so you'd figure with an infant god that would give a little bit of storyline to it, you know, some interest. And how is it unique and imaginative to kill the same god twice? I mean, was somebody thinking, okay, we need a catastrophe in the Forgotten Realms, so let's kill Mystra again? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the Forgotten Realms, as I knew it, is dead.
I used to post on the forums a lot. Then they had a changeover around 2005. I created a new account, and I had 5 posts from 2005 until like the last month or so. And that's mainly since I was talking about 5th edition. And one of the reasons why I left the forum before all these other issues was they removed the section about the novels, because I wasn't playing as much. I wasn't dungeon mastering. I was just reading the novels, entertaining. There were some good ones. I go on the forums, they had the authors there, you could interact with them, and then all of a sudden that's gone. I forgot the exact reason why they decided, hey, we're not gonna have a section for our literature. Like over 300 books, more than that, and we're gonna divorce ourselves from that. I didn't understand that. Let the literary stuff be the literary stuff, the game stuff. It's still part of the same bird, just different wings. And I mean, it was there for people that were just into that sort of thing. I wonder if it tied into what Chris Perkins was talking about, how they didn't play the Forgotten Realms because they couldn't get into the lore, or they didn't know the lore behind it. That just seems like a series of decisions based on the wrong reason. Because you didn't really need much information to jump into the Forgotten Realms. You had all of that, some of the better novels, and gone. Eberron was supposed to be the world with a signature personality. There's a lot about Eberron that's completely odd, completely different. Same with Dark Sun, same with Ravenloft, and even though Dragonlance is more token, basic fantasy, it had some aspects that were completely different. The Forgotten Realms was about its characters and versatility, and that was gone. I mean, at the same time, the Elder Scrolls was starting to build up. Now they're dropping games that sell 10 million in a month, like Skyrim. Game of Thrones, based on a novel, or novels, a whole bunch of them really, is now it's garnering consideration as the greatest television series of all time. I'm a fan of it, but I'm not the only one saying that. So Wizards of the Coast is decapitating their cash cow, releasing games like Dagger Dale, while other people are blowing up with similar fantasy that had less depth. But hey, at least they divorced themselves from Atari. That was a good decision. And I just want to back up a little bit and say, yeah, same bird, different wings with the literature and the game. But if you're a dungeon master, you probably can't read enough fantasy literature. It's a great problem-solving tool, and it's just like if you're a writer, you probably want to read a lot. So yeah, I walked away, and it was difficult. Along with TSR, this was the same company that created the first graphic MMO. The best RPG ever, some of the best RPGs that are in my top 10, some of the best fantasy novels, and it's a shame. At its core, the Forgotten Realms is more marketable than something like Elder Scrolls. I mean, when I worked at Nintendo with a bunch of kids, a lot of them thought that Elder Scrolls was a Dungeons & Dragons setting. And I couldn't blame them. For folks that are familiar with the Game of Thrones, I just want to say this. Yaman Khan didn't die from no infection. Vajra Valmajar and Sekilia Darkhope, if I'm even saying her name right, she's got a pretty name, I just know not to say it. But they would cut Brienne up easy. Manshoon's Rise had as much HBO intrigue as anything. The Heroes of the Shard and I won't say a couple, about 30 Mithril Hall dwarves and the Heroes of the Shard, they would have turned the White Walkers into a bonfire. Temple Hill had a better story than Mass Effect. I know that's kind of off topic. Manshoon's outfit was as swanky as it gets. And the reason why I'm going there and kind of explaining, and I tried other things while I was gone. Some good systems, some bad systems. Even fell in love with the JRPG. And like I said, the reason why I'm going there is I want to get the negatives off my chest first.